Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Metzler, one of the programmers here at SF Fest, Green Film Festival, San Francisco. Thank you for joining us. As you can see, we're kind of in this kind of still pandemic world where we're doing a mixture of live and virtual screenings. But the thing that's neat is we're allowed to, these filmmakers have been making some really great films over the past year or two, and we're excited to share them with the Bay Area. And we're lucky enough to have one of the filmmakers here today to discuss their film Keystone, which you've just seen. Welcome, Maggie O'Day.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris. And I feel so honored to have my film as part of this festival and just really getting the word out about, ecosystems, keystone species, and in particular, the bison.
Yeah, well, it was neat to run across your film because obviously, there's a lot of environmental films out there that kind of deal with the problems that are out there, or portrait of places. Which what I really liked about your film is it kind of helped kind of showcase some of the solutions that exist to kind of get us to a better world. I'm sure many in the audience are wondering what kind of inspired you to kind of, decide to make this film and knew there was a documentary to be made.
Well, it is part of a bigger vision that came to me that I'll share briefly. And I was really inspired around how capitalism was simultaneously like working for us as a society. And also it felt like we were reaching the 11th hour of where capitalism was kind of starting to wane in terms of how we were perceiving resources, and that from this capitalistic perspective, we were extracting resources at a greater rate than we could actually replenish them. And so it led me down this journey into what were the founding belief systems of capitalism. And I found that actually, briefly, the grandfather of capitalism was actually this gentleman, Adam Smith, and he was actually directly influenced by Isaac Newton. And so if you think about it, Isaac Newton is living in this world where everything can be quantified. And so Adam Smith takes this and says, well, if everything can be quantified, then everything can be bought and sold in a market system and have a market value. And without getting too much down the rabbit hole, Adam Smith really believed in this, right, this invisible hand of capitalism, that as the wealth accumulated, it would be then distributed because of the goodness of the wealthy. And so I bring this in because I really see that what happened was economics got separated from nature. And it became that everything was a commodity, instead of really seeing that nature is actually this integral web of species, and it's evolved for millions of years, right? So what I see is that we need to go back in and actually perceive nature more from this quantum perspective, which is based on relationships, right? Because from this quantum place, we're not just viewing existence from a material place, but also from an energetic place. And so this gives you the context. And so basically Keystone is an example of how we have basically commoditized our food system in the cattle, but we haven't considered what are the environmental effects of that, and what are the environmental effects of basically creating genocide against a species for a political purpose, right? And so it's really this larger framework of how do we now incorporate economics, human civilization, and the environment so that it's actually building wealth, right? And so when we look at the bison, we actually say, wow, if we were to be able to gradually shift our meat source and shift into restoring the prairie, we would actually gain much more abundance, and we wouldn't have all of these environmental pulls that the cattle industry has.
So, you have this kind of underlying kind of philosophical underpinning that you wanted to explore. At what point in time did you then know that bison was the kind of the focus that you wanted to do? I mean, did you know very much about bison and the history there beforehand, or was this a discovery through the making of the film?
This was research that I had done for a book that I'll be publishing shortly. And so out of the book, I thought, this to extract this kind of case study of our agricultural system, I thought would have a lot of value. And because bison are such an incredibly majestic animal, in my opinion, they're just like, there's something magical and beastly, and there's an awe about them. And so I figured, how cool would it be to make a documentary, because it would be so visually appealing to explore these animals, in that sense, in that cinematography way.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Is bison or buffalo that are in Golden Gate Park right now? I forgot which one that they have.
They're bison. The buffalo are actually, I guess, a European species, and what we have here are like, actually, I think they're called bison. Bison is the Latin, and so yeah. So I didn't know they have them in Golden Gate now.
Yeah, in Golden Gate Park. Yeah, I guess since the beginning of the park, like 100 something years ago, there's like I don't know, maybe a dozen of them. I think at the height, maybe there were like 2 dozen of them. And I think they're there for curiosity's sake. But
Right.
obviously it's they're good catalysts for kind of discussion on things sometimes when, families and, people run across them. As you were kind of going and, figuring out all the different kind of story points for your film, was there anything that kind of surprised you that you didn't really expect when you first started off on this journey?
I did not expect that. Now there's varying accounts, okay? But basically these species were decimated from around like 30 to 40 million, they say, down to 100 to 1,000.
Yeah, it's hard to just kind of wrap your head around.
Yeah. And it's hard to wrap your head around that it was so poignant, that the politicians at the time were like, it'll be a great day in America when there's not a buffalo left, right? Like what kind of mentality? Like I can't relate to that, right? And I know that politically it was driven on many different fronts, right? And we explore this within the film, that it was actually as an act of war and genocide, to create famine amongst the indigenous people of the plains. And so it was seen as really their only opportunity to basically starve out the people of the plains, the native people there. And so obviously that's an atrocity within itself. It also shows you the level of resolve that those Plains Indians had and the connection they had with the bison, because they were able to keep eluding the generals and the army because their food source was moving. So they would just move with the food source, right? So it really shows you this interconnectedness again between humans and their food source. And I think that there's a real beauty and sacredness that is captured in that relationship, and that relationship of really honoring the food that we're given to eat, and there's it's such a far cry from that to McDonald's, let's say, right? Like where food is so over processed and so far away from its natural state, right? And I think that when we are more connected to our food, we're actually more connected to the planet. And therefore, I think we actually are able to like assimilate what we're ingesting at a deeper level.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good things to think about. I just really appreciate you sharing the film with us. For those that want to know more, kind of continue to follow some of the outreach and engagement you're doing with the film, what's the best way to kind of to do that?
Through keystone-bison.org. We have a website there, and they're free to reach out to us. I know there's so many different organizations now that are really focused on bringing back the bison in various ways. And for people who don't consume meat, which I'm totally in support of too, there's also so much work going on in the prairies and the natural prairie reserve. It's not really all about changing our meat source, but that is one component of it.
Very cool. Well, thank you again for joining us, Maggie, and sharing your film with the Green Film Festival of San Francisco.
Thank you so much. And thanks for hosting this amazing festival.
Thank you.